Soldiers of Reddit, what's the scariest or weirdest thing you ever saw while you were deployed? At a guard gate for traffic in Baghdad, I watched from a safe distance a suicide bomber detonate his car. The soldier looking in to check his papers stepped back quickly the moment before he died in the explosion. He must have seen what was about to happen. A friend of mine was in the initial push in Baghdad, Iraq. A suspicious van was reported. When they arrived, it was rocking. They surrounded and figured it would turn up to be a good laugh. When they opened the van, what they found was all but funny. Two men were gang rapping a 10-year-old girl. Their medic froze as the girl, same age as his own daughter, was crying and bleeding. My friend, a staff sergeant, stepped in and held a gauze pad to stop the bleeding. The two men were tried and punished to death by hanging. There's already plenty of scary stuff here, so I'm going to stick with weirdest. We were in a pretty nice area of Baghdad, and this was when the Iraq War was winding down quite a lot, after the surge, so it wasn't nearly as intense as it was in the years prior. We were doing coordinate knocks, which is basically where you do house searches, but you literally knock on their door and politely go in instead of kicking in the door and running in there. Anyway, we were doing some nice apartments that day, lots of teachers, physicians, etc., and we went into this one guy's apartment, and he had this huge, I'm talking probably 6 tall and 4 wide, fully framed painting by Frank Frazetta. For those who don't know who Frank Frazetta is, he's a fantasy artist mostly known for doing stereotypical Conan the Barbarian artwork, featuring some huge barbarian dude standing there with an axe while some hot girl in a medieval bikini clings to his leg. And lo and behold, here was a massive painting of this exact thing in this guy's nice apartment in an area that was still technically a war zone. The guy spoke little English, but saw me checking out his painting and smiled, gave me a thumbs up, and said is good, no? Yes, is good. Security here, I saw some goat people. It was almost sundown, and this huge group of goats is moving slowly across the hills. I take a peek through binocs to be sure it's nothing fishy. These goats are the type with long matted hair. Among the goats are around 10 shapes, moving just as slowly as the goats. Figures were draped in what looked like burlap, and I couldn't say whether they were even people, but for my mind's sake I'm going to say they were. I told the guys around me to look at this shit. We watched the herd make its way just over the hills as darkness fell. That was it, we never saw any more goat people. Weirder things I experienced was seeing absolutely nothing while being 100% certain that someone was near me. I was on a fob near the border with Pakistan that shared a compound with the Anna. Compound was an old FFL compound that was connected to the main fob by a walkway of smooth gravel with high fencing and floodlights on either side, maybe about 300 feet long and 10 feet wide. This was in the desert, so you could see for miles during the day. There was nothing. Flat as a pancake. Walking from the Anna compound back to the fob around 2,200 and everything is lit up by the floodlights. I can see a good distance in each direction. The only sound is my feet crunching on the gravel. Suddenly, I hear the unmistakable sound of someone landing on the gravel and running like hell not more than 15 feet away from me. There's no one in front of me, so I spin around, sidearm in hand, and no one. Nothing. I can see clear back to the Anna compound and there isn't a goddamn soul. I can still hear something moving fast along the gravel, so I turn back thinking maybe I missed whoever was running. Nothing. And the sound stops. That was a tense walk back to the main compound. The guys on the tower hadn't seen anything, and to this day I have no freaking clue what the hell happened. I never liked these. Scary, weird, bleeding out and being pissed that I have to do it on the 150-degree tarmac, watching my friends bleed out, watching 2 people burn to death in an HMMWV when and I'd bent the frame and we couldn't get them out in time, trying to keep a kid distracted while the medics tried and failed to keep her mother and father alive, coming across the body of a child that was absolutely covered in camel spiders. If you just wanted tragedy, you can leave now. I want to tell a different memory, one that answers a question people rarely ask of soldiers. Here's one of my fondest experiences of war. After sundown the fob went dark. After sundown the town went dark. On moonless nights the stars would come out, and I mean, really come out, millions of them, so thick and bright that the weight of your insignificance pressed down on you until it was liberating. I lived in a converted shipping container, a CHU, with 4 other soldiers. It was hot, it was cramped, it was smelly, and they were my best friends. I'd never had friends like them before, and I don't think I ever will again. About 8 months into a 15-month deployment I took to sneaking off at night. At first it was just a bit of wandering around the fob, just a moment to be with my thoughts and watch the stars. I remember I'd saved some chicken wings from the chow hall in a little bag and had taken off on one of these moonless nights. I found my way to this old abandoned swimming pool. There was no water, of course, and the desert was actively reclaiming the space. I thought it would be a nice place to stargaze for a while. I thought if the mortar splashed down I would probably be okay unless it landed in the pool, but the odds were small so I didn't worry about it. I pressed my back up against the crumbling wall of one side, wiggled just enough to dig out a little butt cavity in the sand, opened up my chicken snack, and just took to digesting both the experiences of the day and my food. I swear I felt them watching me. They say in humans a feeling of being watched is your brain compiling lots of separate bits of data it has already overlooked, an indiscriminate sound, a strange smell, a shadow you would have otherwise ignored. Swear I felt them watching me though. There were 5 of them, little desert foxes, just sitting about 4 feet from me, watching me just as I was watching the stars. I wasn't scared, I'm much larger and I had my M4 with a full combat load. It was just surprising these little creatures were so close. They didn't seem to be scared, just curious as to what I was doing. I tore off little chunks of chicken to see if I could bait them closer. It didn't work so I tossed a little piece over. I was expecting them to fight a little amongst themselves for the prize, but they sniffed at it and seemed to decide amongst themselves who should eat. I wound up feeding them all of my chicken that night. They seemed to take turns eating and would wait patiently for me to toss another little chunk. They never got any closer, but they would take turns laying down or stretching out. I stayed there for hours that night, watching the stars, feeding the little foxes. I never told anyone. I went back loads of times but I never saw the foxes again. I'll never forget that night. Sometimes now when I'm stressed from work and trying to fall asleep I'll think back to that night. I usually sleep well. I am a Vietnam veteran. The scariest, a man's guts. Back when I was in Vietnam I knew this guy named Yedidia. He was a mechanic, didn't have any combat roles but we saw him every day as he was good handyman. Yedidia was kind of stupid, but he was relatively street smart, but he was honestly the kindest man you'd ever meet. He always was helping someone. He told us because he didn't fight, he would make us, the fighters, job easier. He cooked good food for us, fixed things for us, stole things for us. Everybody loved Yedidia. Well, one day, our camp was hit by mortar fire and when it was all over Dwight, Jedediah's mechanic partner, screamed Jedediah's hit. We all rush over to him, and has got a massive gash in his liver area. We all pick him up and rush him to a tin where our medic Matt begins to work on him. We have to hold Jedediah's guts in because they're just pouring out. He is screaming, "I want my mama." Mama, it hurt even more as Yedidia was Mama black, so he died. At this point I know he is done. Love him. His wound is too great, but I keep holding, praying for a miracle. 3 other people died in the attack. Jedediah was the only one that really choked out and he began screaming, "I don't know where I'm going with this, but you ask for scary and I think good people dying like that is pretty scary to do. I want to see my mama again. I'm not ready." He then grunts and starts convulsing. Blood starts pouring out of his mouth, and after a few seconds, he goes limp. Even though he passed, we all stand there holding him. I think I was still holding down some of his liver. After a few moments, Matt lets go, and so do the rest of us. And we all looked at his mangled corpse, guts practically hanging out of his stomach. That was pretty scary. I had been in Vietnam for about a year, so I had seen plenty of mangled bodies, but seeing such a pure, innocent, genuinely good person like Yedidia dying in agony really hurt. It hurt even more as Yedidia was black, so he died for a country that didn't even love him. I've teared up just thinking about it. 3 other people died in the attack, but Jedediah was the only one that really choked everyone up. I don't know where I'm going with this, but you asked for scary and I think good people dying like that is pretty scary. My dad was in the Vietnam War and he said it was reported that a woman put a bomb inside her dead baby, which she must have hollowed out, asked a soldier to hold her child, and they all exploded. I once saw a man squatting on top of his mud hut giving our whole convoy the stink eye while he furiously jerked himself off. Another time we were outside on a fob and we hear what seems to be a very close gunshot. We're surrounded by sharp cliffs, so everyone assumes a sniper and we all get in our armored trucks. We basically lived out of them. We had a big camera on our truck, so we looked around and noticed that the fob dispatched a response team to the small compound on the low ground beneath the base. We watched them talk with the elders when he starts pointing into the field. He takes them into the field and squats down, looking at the ground, so I swap over to IR on the camera, looking for hot spots in the ground where maybe he may have found a night or something. And then, right there, in infrared, I watched this man take a dump. 2 black hot steaming piles fell from under his man dress. He wipes and puts his hand in the dirt and walks away. Turns out the shot was a negligent discharge from the 19-year-old Marine at the end of a 24-hour shift in a guard tower.